Fahreddin Pasha's refusal to surrender Medina is seen by some as an act of heroism. He was willing to sacrifice his own life to protect the holy city. He said that the city was a symbol of Islam, and that its surrender would be a great victory for the infidels. Let's explore the events of the siege and how it was brought to an end. The Siege of Medina is one of the events that happened during the Arab Revolt in 1916. The rebellion initiated on June 9, 1916. Then the rebels occupied of Jeddah on June 16, followed by Mecca on July 7 and Taif on September 22. All of this is primarily due to the inadequate leadership of Ghalib Pasha, the governor of Mecca. Starting from Jeddah, Sharif Hussein's forces, in cooperation with allied tribes, successfully captured Mecca and all the villages along the northern coastal strip of the Hejaz. This extended from Jeddah to Yanbu via Rabigh, Mustaurah, and Badr. Proceeding from Badr, they moved southwest through Wadi Al-Safraa, eventually camping near Bir Darwish in Al-Farish, in preparation for the siege of the city. The siege of Medina commenced in October 1916 when Arab forces, led by Faisal, Sharif Hussein's son, faced significant losses while attempting to breach the well-fortified Ottoman defenses. The Ottomans were armed with artillery, while the Arab forces, although more mobile, lacked proper equipment and support. Consequently, Arab and Allied strategists decided to lay siege to Medina instead of attempting a direct assault. This strategy aimed to tie down the Ottoman forces within the city, allowing the Arab and Allied forces to concentrate their efforts on other fronts, including Palestine, Sinai, Mesopotamia, and Aqaba. Following the fall of the Hejaz to the rebels, the Ottoman armies withdrew from the region, leaving only Fakhr al-Din Pasha and his garrison of 15,000 soldiers along with a few cannons. Fakhr al-Din Pasha found himself isolated in the midst of a vast desert, surrounded by enemies, with the nearest Ottoman army positioned 1,300 kilometers away. His supply lines were completely severed. This isolation was further exacerbated by British spy Lawrence and his Bedouin allies, who sabotaged the Hejaz railway and telegraph infrastructure at multiple points, leaving him cut off from the outside world, entirely alone, and besieged by enemies vastly outnumbering his troops. The Arabs encircled the city with an overwhelming force of more than 30,000 soldiers. Throughout 1917 and 1918, the rebels launched numerous attacks on the city and repeatedly demanded his surrender, but each time, Fakhr al-Din Pasha successfully repelled their advances. Despite his limited resources, Fakhr al-Din Pasha valiantly defended the city of Medina for an impressive 2 years and 7 months. Initially, his goal was to establish a secure perimeter around the city and its suburbs. He achieved this by clearing the rebels from areas including Asir Bay, Bir Darwish, and Bir al-Raha. This effort resulted in the creation of a secure zone extending 100 kilometers around the city. Following the Ottoman Empire's resignation from World War I with the Armistice of Mudros on October 30, 1918, the expectation was that Fahreddin Pasha would also surrender. Contrary to expectations, he staunchly refused to surrender, persisting even after the war had officially concluded, despite appeals from the Ottoman Sultan. He maintained control of the city for a total of 72 days beyond the war's end. Directives were issued by the Ottoman government for Fahreddin Pasha to evacuate the city and yield it to the Allied forces in accordance with the terms of the Mondros Armistice Treaty. However, he adamantly rejected these orders from his own leadership and government, taking a defiant stance. Paragraph 16 of the Mondros Armistice Treaty explicitly mandated that all Ottoman military units in the Hejaz, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq surrender to the nearest Allied commander. The British authorities reached out to him via wireless communication from a warship in the Red Sea, emphasizing the imperative of surrender in light of the war's conclusion. Feridun Pasha remained resolute in his refusal. The Grand Vizier, Ahmed Aziz Pasha, wrote an emotional letter to him, tearfully instructing him to hand over the city in compliance with the treaty. This message was conveyed by an officer holding the rank of captain. However, Feridun Pasha detained the captain and sent a message to the Grand Vizier, asserting, "The city of the Messenger of Allah is unlike any other, hence, the Grand Vizier's orders are insufficient in this matter. He must receive a direct order from the Caliph himself." An official order from the Caliph, commanding Feridun Pasha to surrender the city, was issued. This imperial decree was transmitted through the Minister of Justice, Haider Mullah. Nevertheless, Feridun responded via the Minister of Justice, arguing, the Caliph is currently held captive by the Allies, and therefore, he lacks independent authority. He refuses to enact his orders and rejects surrender. Realizing that they couldn't overpower Feridun Pasha through military force, the British opted for a different approach. They employed bribery to sway some soldiers within his army, leading to his arrest on January 10, 1919. Subsequently, Abdullah I of Jordan and his troops entered Medina on January 13, 1919. And thus one of the longest siege of history was ended. Around 8,000 members of the Turkish garrison, comprising 519 officers and 7,545 soldiers, were evacuated to Egypt following their surrender. Additionally, some succumbed to disease, while others scattered to various regions independently. The besiegers gained control of the garrison's weaponry and ammunition.